Tonight, we journey to the rolling hills of medieval Yorkshire. The year is 1461. The air is cold. Snow drifts lazily over a quiet English countryside, but beneath this serene landscape lies the memory of the bloodiest single day in English history. Close your eyes if you like. Take a slow breath and let your thoughts settle like snow. You are safe here, you are warm, and we are going far, far back in time, to a land of winding roads and wind-worn abbeys, of castle ruins and ancient stone bridges, to a time when knights still rode on horseback, wrapped in chain and steel, when lords carried banners with painted roses white and red, and when the fate of a kingdom lay balanced on a bitter winter morning. This is the story of Towton. But don't worry, we're not here to rush. We're not here to charge into battle. There will be no loud moments, no sudden sounds, just a slow walk through history, as soft and steady as footsteps through fallen snow. Let us begin with the land. England in the 15th century was not yet a single, unified country as we might imagine today. It was a collection of counties and castles, barons and bishops. Power was local and loyalty was personal. The throne, though draped in gold and divine right, often shook like a candle in the wind. Kings came and went, sometimes peacefully, but more often not. The roads of England were worn by horses, hooves, and armored boots. Villagers whispered of rumors of new kings, of coming war, of shifting banners. And high above the rooftops of cottages, noble families eyed each other through the frosted windows of their halls. This is the world of the Wars of the Roses, a time when two rival branches of the royal house of Plantagenet, the House of Lancaster, and the House of York tore the realm apart. They were all cousins, in truth, all descended from the same royal line. But blood ties often run thinner than ambition. The House of Lancaster wore the red rose, the House of York the white. You'll hear those names a lot tonight. Lancaster and York, two colors, two names, two destinies, and between them a kingdom caught in the cold. Now, take a moment, picture the countryside, imagine a quiet field tucked between ancient hills. There are no fences here, no electric lines, no hum of cars, only the whisper of the wind and the soft hush of falling snow. A rabbit's paw disturbs the frost. A fox slinks between the hedges, and above, grey skies stretch heavy with silence. This is Yorkshire in the far north of England, the land of abbeys and oak groves, of dales and rivers. Even in modern times, it feels older than it should, as if history never really left. But in the year 1461, these hills were not so peaceful. They held secrets. The snow-covered paths you now imagine were once soaked in blood. Thousands of men, young and old, noble and common, marched to this place under their lords, believing they fought for justice, for honor, for rightful kings. But many of them would never return. They would lie where they fell, in ditches, in rivers, in frozen fields, their armor twisted, their swords dulled, their names forgotten by most, all except the place, Towton. It was not supposed to be this way. The wars had begun years earlier, first with words, then with whispers, and then with swords. At the heart of the storm was a troubled king, Henry VI, a man of peace, of faith, and gentle heart, but not of strength. He was more monk than monarch. He suffered from bouts of catatonia, falling silent for months at a time. During these absences, others ruled in his name, powerful lords and ambitious rivals. Among them stood Richard, Duke of York, a man of royal blood and strong will. He claimed a greater right to the throne than Henry, and when words failed, steel followed. Richard would not live to wear the crown. He was slain before the Battle of Towton, ambushed at Wakefield, and his severed head was mockingly crowned with paper thorns on a city wall. But his death did not end the cause. His son, just 18 years old, would take up his banner, tall, charismatic, and ruthless. His name was Edward, and he would become the first Yorkist king of England, Edward IV, but not yet. Before he could truly take the crown, he would have to face the full might of the Lancastrian army, and they were waiting. In Towton, let's pause here for a moment, because the snow is still falling, and our journey has only begun. This wasn't a battle of two small warbands, clashing by accident on a forgotten moor. No, Towton was something far larger. It was an organized slaughter on a scale England had never seen. Over 50,000 men marched to fight that day, maybe more. Some estimates even say 80,000, almost 1% of the entire English population at the time. It was war at its most desperate, at its most brutal, and at its most personal. This was not kings on horses directing men from a distance. This was hand to hand, face to face, hours of fighting, steel on bone, mud, blood, and snow. But we'll get there in time. For now, let us linger in the quiet. Can you hear the snow? Let it fall softly in your mind. Let it cover the hills. Let it blanket the memories. The battle will come, but not yet, because this is a video not about the noise of war but the hush of history. A gentle walk through violent times, a quiet remembering. We will speak of helmets and swords, of banners and blood, but slowly, calmly, as if reading from an old, forgotten book by Firelight. And now, perhaps your thoughts are beginning to soften. Perhaps your eyes are growing heavier. That is all right, that the names and places drift by like clouds. There is no test, no pressure, no right way to listen. Let history be your lullaby. In the next hour, we will walk together through Yorkshire fields, past warhorses and archers, through fog and frozen breath, to a lonely battlefield, where snow once fell on steel, and where echoes still sleep beneath the soil. But tonight they rise not to frighten, but to whisper, to tell you their story, to help you rest. So now, lie back, let the quiet guide you, and let us begin. Part 1. England in Crisis. The origins of the Wars of the Roses. Let us begin far from the battlefield. Let us begin not with bloodshed, but with lineage, with inheritance, with the long roots of a royal family tree that once stretched unbroken. Across the centuries, we begin in a quiet place, a scroll unrolling, a candle flickering above a parchment. The names of kings written in slow, deliberate Latin. The House of Plantagenet had ruled England since the time of Henry II in the 12th century. They were a dynasty of ambition, strength, and conflict. They built cathedrals and fought crusades. They conquered Wales, battled in Scotland, and ruled great swathes of France. Their reign was marked by immense power and deep turmoil. The legacy was carved into the stones of castles and whispered in the prayers of monks. But even as they rose, so too did the seeds of division. By the 15th century, the Plantagenet line was a family divided against itself. From it sprang two branches, the House of Lancaster and the House of York. And from these two would come a war so brutal, so deeply personal, it would tear England apart. A war not of foreign invasion, but of kin against kin, of cousin against cousin, of red against white. The family tree unfolds, imagine, an old illuminated manuscript, richly decorated with gold leaf and blue ink. A family tree stretches across the page like the limbs of a great oak. At its base, roots wind deep into the soil of ancient France and the royal houses of Normandy, and a Yongo dot at the top. We see Edward III, a powerful and beloved king. He had many sons, and it is through these sons that the great crisis would one day erupt. Edward III ruled with a blend of martial prowess and administrative skill. He had secured victories in France and fostered a period of relative stability. Yet his prolific lineage created a problem. Too many sons, too many claims. Edward's third son, John of Gaunt, became the Duke of Lancaster. Through him came the Lancastrian line. His descendants would rule as the Lancastrian kings, Henry IV, Henry V, and Henry VI. Edward's fourth son, Edmund of Langley, became the Duke of York. His descendants would form the House of York. These two branches coexisted in uneasy harmony for decades, but ambition and a lack of clear succession would turn these branches into swords. The rise of Henry being 1422. The great warrior King Henry V died. He had defeated the French at Agincourt and won enormous glory for England. Under his leadership, the dream of a united English-French crown seemed tantalizingly close, but his legacy fell into uncertain hands. His son, Henry VI, was just an infant barely 9 months old, a baby crowned in Westminster Abbey, too small to hold the orb, too weak to grasp the scepter. He would wear the crown, but he would never truly rule. Henry VI was a gentle soul, kind, pious, generous, but he was unsuited to the brutal world of medieval politics. He suffered from long bouts of mental illness, slipping into catatonic states for weeks at a time. He was easily swayed by stronger minds around him. Clergy, and especially his wife, Margaret of Anjou. England under Henry VI, began to unravel. Lawlessness spread through the countryside. Nobles turned their private armies against each other. Trade declined. Taxes rose. The French recaptured much of their lost territory. The glory of Agincourt faded into dust, and so the realm cried out. For a leader, one man rose to prominence. One man seemed to hold the hope of a better future. Richard, Duke of York, entered. The Duke of York, Richard, was a descendant of Edward III through both his father and his mother. His claim to the throne was arguably stronger than Henry VI's, but Richard did not immediately seek the crown. Instead, he served as Lord Protector during Henry's periods of incapacity. He was capable, popular in many parts of England, and supported by powerful nobles who resented the corrupt influence surrounding Queen Margaret. He restored some order, enforced justice, and cut through courtly intrigue with a sharp administrative mind. Yet power invites fear. Margaret saw Richard as a threat to her son's inheritance. She maneuvered to remove him from power, gathering supporters to her cause. The realm split. The factions sharpened their blades, and thus began the first sparks of war. The roses, symbols of allegiance, let us take a moment and look not to the battlefield, but to the emblem. The flower, the white rose of York, the red rose of Lancaster. Imagine them embroidered on standards, painted on shields, carved into stone and wood. The white rose, crisp and elegant, a symbol of purity, honor, and ancient lineage. Its petals soft but resolute. It bloomed in winter hearts. The red rose, bold and rich, a symbol of passion, of rightful kingship, of enduring strength. It burned on banners, proud and crimson. These were not just flowers, they were emblems of loyalty, of identity, of belief. In villages and towns, people whispered these names: York, Lancaster, red, white, brother turned against brother, father against son. The country was split down its very heart. Allegiance became a matter of life or death. To wear the wrong rose in the wrong town could cost you everything, and yet some men wore neither. They hid, they watched, they waited. The concept of loyalty and betrayal in the medieval world, loyalty was everything. It was not abstract, it was personal. One did not serve a crown or an ideal. One served a lord, a man, a family. Loyalty could bring protection, land, and purpose. Betrayal, however, was worse than death. It was eternal disgrace. But in these years, loyalty became difficult. When the rightful king was weak and another man claimed he could do better, what did honor demand? To remain faithful to a failing crown, or to serve the man who might save the kingdom? These questions tore through noble houses like fire. Great names like Neville, Percy, Stafford, and De Vere all had to choose. Some changed sides more than once. The realm became a chessboard, every move a gamble, every alliance a risk. One day you were a loyal servant, the next a traitor, and still people prayed for guidance, prayed for peace. From Richard to Edward Richard, Duke of York, led a rising against the Lancasters. In 1460 he entered London and forced Parliament to recognize him as heir to the throne. Disinheriting Henry VI's son, Edward of Westminster, it was a bold act, a dangerous act, one that could not go unanswered, and so it was answered with swords. In December 1460, Richard was ambushed at Wakefield. He was killed, his head placed on a spike by Lancastrian forces, a mock paper crown pressed upon his brow. But even in death, Richard's cause did not die. His son, Edward, took up the banner. Edward was young, barely 19, but he was tall, strong, and charismatic. He had the bearing of a king, the spirit of a warrior, the heart of a leader. He rallied the Yorkist cause with incredible speed. At Mortimer's Cross, he won a crucial victory. A parhelion, a rare atmospheric phenomenon, where three suns appeared in the sky, was seen before the battle. His men took it as a divine sign. They marched with joy. They fought with fury. Edward marched toward London, cheered by crowds, on March 4th, 1461. He declared himself king, Edward IV, but declarations did not make a crown secure. To be king in name was not enough. He would have to fight, and that fight would come to a head in a frozen field in Yorkshire, near a small village called Towton. But that is for another time. For now, let us rest among family trees and fading banners, among the white rose and the red, among the gentle light of candle flames dancing across old parchment. The storm is coming, but not yet. Here, for a little while longer, England is quiet, divided but quiet. Part 2. Setting the stage. Winter of 1462-61. The winter of 1460 into the spring of 1461 was no ordinary season in England. It came not only with bitter cold, but with the sharp edge of uncertainty. The sky, heavy with brooding clouds, cast long shadows over a kingdom caught between loyalty and ambition. In the far north, in the ridged and rolling lands of Yorkshire, the ground was frozen. Ice clung to the edges of narrow rivers, and snow layered the hilltops like a death shroud. March had arrived, but spring felt worlds away. The land breathed slowly under a grey sky. There was a stillness to the countryside, broken only by the soft moan of wind through leafless trees, and the creaking of old barn doors swinging on rusted hinges. Villages lay cloaked in frost. There, stone cottages clustered like huddled sheep beneath soot-darkened thatch. Smoke from hearth fires curled up into the grey air, a faint sign of life against the stillness. The wind bit through woolen cloaks. Farmers walked hunched and wordless through frozen fields. Children stayed indoors. Crows perched in silence, like sentries on the bare limbs of winter trees. The land held its breath, but beneath this calm lay tension, a terrible, brittle tension, for across the frozen land armies were moving, the two armies forming to the north. The forces of Lancaster were mustering under the command of Henry Beaufort, the Duke of Somerset. Young and bold, Somerset was a loyal servant of Queen Margaret and the House of Lancaster. He carried the weight of a cause believed to be divinely ordained, defending the throne of Henry VI. Somerset was no stranger to battle. He had seen the flash of steel and smelled the stench of blood before. But what he faced now was unlike anything. In living memory, the Yorkist army advancing from the south was vast, determined, and led by a man who had recently declared himself king. That man was Edward of York, barely 19 years old. Edward was tall remarkably, so towering over his men at well over 6 feet. His presence was striking, not merely because of his stature, but because of his confidence. Born of nobility and forged in the fire of rebellion, Edward had already seen more war than many veterans. Charismatic, brave, and ruthlessly pragmatic, he carried the hopes of the House of York. He had recently claimed the throne as Edward IV, following the death of his father, Richard, Duke of York. At the Battle of Wakefield just months earlier, Wakefield had been a brutal blow for the Yorkists. Richard's death had been gruesome, his severed head mounted on a spike, mockingly crowned with paper thorns and displayed at Micklegate Bar in York. But the death of Richard had not ended the conflict. It had deepened it. Edward was determined, not only to avenge his father, but to seize the crown that York blood had claimed. In March of 1461, Edward began a push north to confront the Lancastrian army head. Geography of Yorkshire in March. The geography of Yorkshire shaped everything. To come, Towton, a small village nestled among high ridges and open fields, sat atop a ridge between the villages of Saxton and Totendale. The River Cock, narrow but swift, wound its way through the area, flanked by steep banks and marshy terrain. In March, the river would have been swollen with melted snow, its waters cold and fast. The ground, though beginning to thaw in places, remained hard with frost. The fields were open and exposed, making any large army visible for miles. Trees were sparse, shelter was limited. Hills and low ridges created natural lines of defense, but also traps for those retreating. There were no highways, only rutted tracks. Movement was slow. Supplies came by cart and by pack horse. The men walked dot, and the snow, that cold white blanket, was both friend and enemy. It masked movement, it muffled sound, but it froze limbs and dulled swords. It turned open fields into treacherous killing grounds, the Lancaster Campion, the days before the battle. Somerset and his commanders chose their position carefully. They held the higher ground, forming their line near Towton, where they could see across the open field toward Saxton. Their camp was grim and disciplined. Fires were small and closely guarded. Noise was minimal. Sentries stood at all hours, their breath misting in the cold. Hands clenched around spear shafts. The men, perhaps 30,000 strong or more, came from across the north. Many had fought at Wakefield or at the Second Battle of St. Albans. Some were veterans, others were levies, called from farms and towns by the banners of their lords. Most were cold, tired, and frightened. The camp reeked of smoke and wet wool. Horses snorted and stamped. Men crouched around fires, warming calloused hands, sharing bread and meat with numb fingers. Armor was checked and rechecked. Arrows were counted, pikes were sharpened, and prayers were whispered, always prayers. They knew what was coming. Everyone did. The Yorkist camped to the South. Edward's army encamped near Saxton. He had marched north in winter, gathering strength as he moved, rallying support from loyal lords and those emboldened by his recent proclamation of kingship. His army was large, likely matching or exceeding the Lancastrians. Like Somerset, Edward knew the confrontation was inevitable. He chose his ground carefully, though his men would have to fight uphill. In his camp, the mood was tense but resolute. Edward walked among his soldiers. He spoke to them plainly. He knew their names, their fears. His confidence steadied them. They too built fires, lit only at night. Leather tents flapped in the wind. Horses were tethered in lines, their breath rising in columns of fog. Men lay close together beneath woolen cloaks, their armor stacked beside them, their weapons within reach. Some laughed nervously, others sat in silence. Stories were told, psalms were sung. It was not a joyful camp, but it was a determined one. Above them, stars wheeled coldly through the night sky. Digression. What medieval camps were like? What did a medieval army camp feel like in March? It was not like the romantic stories often told. It was closer to hardship than to glory. Tents were made of linen or wool, treated with grease or wax to resist moisture. Larger tents belonged to lords, and smaller lean-tos were used by common soldiers. Most men slept on the ground, using straw mats or bundled cloaks as bedding. Fires were vital, not just for cooking, but for warmth. Yet too many fires meant exposure. Smoke could betray position, so fires were carefully controlled, often built in trenches or covered pits. Food was basic: salted pork or beef, hard bread, root vegetables if available. Ale was safer than water. Wine was reserved for the noblemen. That noise of a camp was constant, even when quiet. The clink of armor as men adjusted their gear, the creak of wagon wheels, the snort of horses, the low murmur of conversation, and prayer. Always prayer. Many soldiers carved crosses into wooden staves or tucked bits of scripture into their tunics. Death was expected. Heaven was hoped for. The camps were male, muddy, and mortal. There were no illusions of heroism here only. Survival. As dawn approached on Palm Sunday, March 29th, 1461, both armies stirred in their camps. The final preparations were made. Letters were written. Swords were sharpened one last time. Some men made confessions. Others stared into the fire. Snow began to fall. Not a blizzard, just a steady, curtain-like fall of flakes, driven sideways by a hard wind. It was bitterly cold. But the time had come, and the bloodiest battle ever fought on English soil was about to begin. But for a few more moments, we will stay here in the quiet, among tents and prayers, among snowflakes and rising breath. The swords are still sheathed. The archers have not yet loosed. Let us remain a little longer in the calm, because the storm... is coming. Part 3. The March to Towton. Gathering storms. Imagine, if you will, the land of northern England in the early spring of 1461, a place where the breath of winter still lingers in the air, where frost grips the earth like a cold, unyielding hand, and where every sound feels muffled by a thick, hovering mist. The sky above is a broad canvas of soft greys and pale blues, streaked faintly with the first timid touches of dawn. The world seems to hold its breath, wrapped in a delicate, frozen stillness. This silence, though, is deceptive, for beneath this quiet, something monumental is stirring. It is the calm before a storm, unlike any England has yet endured, the final gathering of two massive armies, brothers and cousins and countrymen, set to collide in a struggle that will be remembered for centuries to come. The land and the season. Northern England's bitter march. Northern England at this time is a land of rolling hills, dark forests, and wide rivers that carve slow paths through the countryside. The ground is hard and frozen beneath a thin crust of snow, the white sparkle of frost lingering even under the pale spring sun. Every footstep cracks sharply against the brittle earth. Every horse's hoof sinks with a dull thud into the muddy paths, melting slowly with the thaw. The cold is a constant companion. Men, wrapped in thick woolen cloaks and fur-lined hoods, draw their garments closer, the chill biting through layers of cloth and leather. The air tastes sharp and clean-laced, with the scent of smoke from campfires and the distant temps of the river. The wind whispers through bare branches, carrying the faint rustle of dried leaves and the occasional cry of a raven circling overhead. This is no easy journey for an army. It is slow, methodical, painful, the frost that once made the ground firm. Enough for marching now gives way to mud that threatens to swallow wheels and hooves alike. Rivers swollen with melting snow must be crossed with care. Supplies are precious and hard to come by. The countryside too worn from years of war to offer much bounty. Yet, despite the hardships, men press onward, driven by duty, fear, ambition, and the hope that the coming battle will settle the fate of the kingdom. Edward IV, the young king, on the move at the head of this moving mass rides Edward IV, king by the grace of sword and crown, yet still a young man, barely out of boyhood. He carries the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders, but his gaze is steady and determined. His armor is polished to a muted shine, marked by the white rose of York, the symbol of his house, embroidered upon his surcoat and emblazoned on his standard. Edward is no mere figurehead. Though young, he is sharp-minded and fierce, a warrior with the charisma to rally men to his cause. His dark hair, slightly tousled by the wind, frames a face that holds a mixture of resolve and the faintest trace of youthful uncertainty. A man who knows the road ahead will be brutal, yet embraces his destiny. Behind him, the great host of Yorkist soldiers stretches for miles. Knights in shining plate mail, their horses snorting clouds of steam in the cold morning air. Archers clutch their longbows, fingers stiff but ready. Foot soldiers march in formation, their breath forming. White clouds that mingle with the mist, the ground vibrates with the rhythmic beat of thousands of boots, the occasional clatter of armor, and the distant calls of commanders issuing orders. The army's composition, faces and stories. Each man in this army carries a story, a life filled with hopes and fears. There is Thomas, a farmer from Lincolnshire, who traded his plough for a spear. Leaving behind his wife and 2 young children, his hands are calloused and rough, but steady. He fights not for glory, but to protect his home from the chaos that threatens to swallow the land. Beside him rides Sir Geoffrey, a noble knight whose family's loyalty to the House of York has been unwavering for generations. His armor bears the dents and scratches of past battles, his horse restless beneath him. He prays silently for victory and survival, for his honor, his lands, and the future of his lineage. There is also young William, barely 16, wide-eyed and eager, clutching a crude sword far too large for his frame. This is his first campaign, and though fear gnaws at his heart, he hides it beneath a brave smile. He looks to Edward as a beacon of hope in these dark times. The march through harsh Torrenda road north is tortuous. Edward's army moves slowly through narrow, winding country lanes lined with gnarled hedgerows and ancient oaks, their branches bare and twisting like skeletal hands against the sky. Every mile tests the stamina of man and beast alike. The mud clings to boots and wheels, sucking at the soldiers' feet. Horses struggle under their armored riders, slipping and regaining balance with careful effort. Supplies grow scarce, and cooks must stretch rations thin. Fires are lit sparingly. Smoke might reveal their position to enemy scouts. Despite the grueling march, camaraderie blooms in the camps. Men share scraps of bread and stories by the firelight. Ballads sung softly recall better days, the glories of past kings and heroes, and the dream of peace to come. These small moments of warmth and fellowship stand in stark contrast to the grim purpose driving them forward. The strategic crossing of the River Ira, critical obstacle, awaits the River Ira, winding and swollen from recent thaws. At Ferry, a narrow stone bridge spans the river, a vital crossing on the route to Towton and deeper into Lancastrian territory. The Yorkist vanguard, led by Lord John Fitzwalter, moves cautiously to secure this crossing. The bridge, ancient and worn, is just wide enough for a few horses abreast, making it a natural choke point, a place where the movement of an army can be halted or destroyed. The surrounding woods loom dark and silent, hiding eyes and weapons. Ready to spring, the tension here is palpable. Every man alert for the sound of enemy footsteps or the twang of a BOW string. The ambush at Ferrybridge. Without warning, Lancastrian forces, commanded by the ruthless Lord Clifford, infamous as the Butcher for his brutality, launch a sudden assault. Arrows darken the sky, whistling through the cold air. Men shout warnings, raise shields, and charge forward, steel clashing against steel. The narrow bridge becomes a deadly trap. Horses and soldiers struggle for footing. The icy stones slick beneath their feet. Some slip, plunging into the freezing river, swept away by the swift current. Lord Fitzwalter fights with valor, but the Lancastrians press hard. His forces are overwhelmed, and he falls amid the carnage. His life ended in a desperate fight, but Edward's leadership shines. He quickly orders the construction of makeshift rafts and directs soldiers to ford the river at shallow points. The Yorkists, battered but unbroken, push through under fire, crossing the Ira by nightfall. Though costly, the crossing is a strategic success, opening the way to the battlefield beyond, the Lancastrian camp above Towton awaiting Edward's arrival. On the heights above Towton lies the Lancastrian army, a sea of red banners and determined faces. Their camp sprawls across the plateau, fires glowing warmly against the cold night. The men are seasoned fighters, weary but resolute. Among them is Henry Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, a veteran commander who understands the stakes, the very future of his house. His king and his country hangs in the balance. The soldiers huddle close to their fires, muffled in cloaks, stiff with frost. Some sharpen weapons, others pray or write last letters home. The air is thick with the mingled scents of burning wood, sweat, and leather. Their banners bear the red rose of Lancaster, bold and proud, fluttering defiantly against the chill wind. The human side of war pause here and consider the faces on both sides. The weary knight, adjusting his helmet in the flickering firelight, eyes heavy with exhaustion but burning with purpose. The young archer, hands stiff from cold but sure in grip, whispering a prayer to St. George. The camp follower tending the wounded, her hands gentle, though the night is long. The noble lord planning strategy by candlelight, aware that every decision could mean life or death for thousands. War is not just steel and blood. It is hope and fear, courage and despair, love and loss. The night before battle, silent prayers and quiet resolves, darkness falls. A deep stillness settles over the field. The armies prepare in silence, each man wrapped in his thoughts. Fires flicker and smoke curls upward, carrying whispered prayers to the indifferent stars. Edward IV moves among his men, offering quiet encouragement. His voice is calm but firm, a beacon in the gathering dark. He reminds them of their cause, their right, their duty. Across the valley, the Lancastrians do the same, steeling themselves for what the dawn will bring. The calm before the storm above all, the world seems to hold its breath. The cold night air wraps the land in a fragile embrace. The wind sighs softly through leafless branches. Somewhere a dog barks once, then falls silent. Tomorrow this quiet will be shattered. Tomorrow brother will face brother. Tomorrow the frozen fields of Towton will be soaked with blood. For now, though, the night endures, and with it a fleeting peace. The burden of leadership, Edward IV's internal struggles, though Edward IV's exterior projects confidence and strength, inside his mind 1,000 thoughts swirled doubts, fears, hopes. He carries not only the sword and the crown, but also the lives of thousands of men. Every decision weighs heavily. Should he push the army to move faster and risk exhaustion, or slower and risk losing the advantage? What if the Lancastrians have hidden forces? What if his men lose heart? He is a young king with an ancient burden. Each night, beneath the cold stars, Edward prays quietly, asking for wisdom and courage. He recalls the stories of his ancestors, of Edward III's victories and Richard, Duke of York's sacrifices. He knows history watches him now. Medieval warfare logistics. Feeding an army on the move. An army of this size is like a living, breathing beast. It needs constant feeding, watering, and care. Before the march, quartermasters have scoured villages and farms for supplies. Every horse must be fed oats, hay, and water. Carefully rationed, each soldier carries a small bundle of dried bread, salted meat, and cheese. Simple fare, but enough to sustain. Cooks 10 large cauldrons over fires, boiling stews of barley and vegetables scavenged or carried. Yet food runs low as the march continues. The mud and cold make foraging difficult. The soldiers dream of fresh bread and warm ale. Rare luxuries now. Even the medical supplies are meager. Herbs and bandages carried by a handful of surgeons and barbers. Wounds will be common, and many may never heal. The role of heralds and messengers' communication across the army is vital and complex. Heralds ride swiftly, clad in colorful tabards, bearing messages between commanders and the king. They must navigate muddy roads and avoid enemy scouts, carrying news of troop movements, orders, and intelligence. Their voices carry across campfires, announcements, calls to arms, and updates on the enemy's positions. Without their swift dispatch, coordination would collapse. Camp life. The quiet moments amidst war, though, the looming battle commands attention. Daily life in camp hums quietly beneath the surface. Soldiers wash in icy streams when they can, their faces streaked with grime. Some mend torn cloaks or patch armor, stitching by firelight. Others practice swordplay, sharpening their reflexes and nerves. The camp is alive with sounds, the crackling of firewood, low conversations in varied accents, the clink of metal as men tend weapons. Occasionally, a minstrel strums a lute or sings a mournful ballad, offering a brief escape. The psychological toll, fear, hope, and brotherhood war is as much a battle of minds as of bodies. Many soldiers wrestle with fear of death, injury, or capture. Some comfort themselves with prayers or relics. Others find strength in the presence of comrades. The unspoken bond formed in hardship, brotherhood grows in these shared moments between knights and common soldiers alike. Men look to their leaders for signs of confidence. Edward's presence is a beacon. His youth and vigor inspire hope, yet even hope is fragile. The broader political stakes, England's future on a knife's edge, this battle is not merely a clash of armies. It is a contest for the soul of England. If the Yorkists win, Edward IV's claim to the throne will be secured, promising a new era of strong leadership. The country might heal its divisions and restore order if the Lancastrians prevail. Henry VI's fragile reign will continue, but so too will the instability, a weak king, factional violence, and a kingdom vulnerable to foreign threats. Nobles across the land watch anxiously. Many hedge their bets, waiting to see which side will triumph. The quiet in the eye of the storm as dawn approaches. An eerie calm falls. The men wake early, rubbing tired eyes. Armor is checked and adjusted, weapons cleaned, horses neigh softly. Sensing the tension, leaders walk among the ranks, offering quiet words, ensuring readiness. The sky remains heavy with clouds, the promise of snow in the air. The cold is biting, but no man moves to seek warmth. All await the signal. The final preparations, aligning the army's Edward, surveys his troops arrayed on the hillside. The white rose banners fluttering like a sea of stars against the grey sky. He assigns positions, sends final messengers to coordinate with allies, and listens to reports of enemy movements. Nearby, archers string their longbows, tightening sinew and practicing draw. Cavalrymen mount heavy destriers, reins in hand. Every man knows what tomorrow may bring. Some whisper last prayers. Others stare into the distance, lost in thought. Part 4. The Morning of Battle. Towton, March 29th, 1461. A pale dawn over England. The morning breaks slowly over the northern fields of Yorkshire. The sun is a pale disk behind thick clouds, barely warming the frozen earth. March 29th, 1461. Palm Sunday dawns with an unsettling stillness. The world seems to hold its breath, as if nature itself awaits the coming storm. There is a delicate hush across the landscape. The usual sounds of morning are muted beneath a blanket of frost and silence. The chill air carries a sense of foreboding, a quiet anticipation that something immense is about to unfold. The earth, hardened by winter's last grasp, remains firm and unyielding beneath the feet of those gathered. Every shadow and every breath seem more pronounced in this stillness, lending the moment a feeling of suspended time, like a calm sea before a violent tempest. The landscape is painted in muted tones. Frosted grass blades glisten like shards of glass. Bare trees reach skeletal arms toward the sky, and the soft murmur of the rivercock flows steadily, oblivious to the chaos that will soon unfold on its banks. The sky is a heavy grey canvas, heavy with low-hanging clouds that threaten to release snow at any moment. Fields stretch wide and empty, interrupted only by distant clusters of leafless trees whose branches seem to grasp at the cold air. River winds lazily through the valley below, its waters dark and slow, reflecting the pallid sky like a mirror. Here and there, icy patches catch the faint light, sparkling like tiny diamonds, contrasting with the dull earth. Nature, serene and indifferent, waits patiently as if unaware of the human drama poised to erupt on its ancient stage. The battlefield, Towton, stretches before the assembled armies, a gentle valley carved over centuries by the winding river below. It is a place shaped by time, where the contours of the land tell stories of forgotten seasons and centuries-old human struggles. The valley's slopes rise gradually on either side, offering limited vantage points, but a wide open ground below where armies could mass and maneuver. The air is crisp and sharp, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves from last autumn. Small streams, tributaries of the River Cock, weave through the fields, their icy waters glinting faintly under the clouded sky. This dale, tranquil in most seasons, now lies heavy with tension, ready to bear witness to one of the bloodiest days in England's history. Fields once used for spring planting now lie bare, churned and scarred by the footsteps of thousands. The terrain is a patchwork of frozen earth and thawing mud, dotted with hedgerows and shallow ditches. These natural obstacles shape the movement of the armies, determining their formations and their strategies. The ploughed furrows and uneven ground make it difficult for heavy cavalry to maneuver with ease, while the hedges provide natural defensive positions but also hazards for foot soldiers. Patches of ice and frost create treacherous footing, threatening to disrupt the tight discipline of the ranks. The riverbanks, slippery and uneven, form a natural barrier at the rear of the Lancastrian forces, restricting their retreat options. Towton's fields, in their frozen silence, seem to hold the memory of countless footsteps yet to come. The marching of men toward death or victory. The gathering armies, two great forces, face one another on this cold morning. The scale of the armies is immense, with tens of thousands of men arrayed in long lines stretching far across the valley. Their armor and weapons catch what little light filters through the clouds, creating a sea of shining steel and muted colors. The ground beneath them crunches faintly with frost as men shift their weight, anxious and eager in equal measure. Every man's breath rises in frosty clouds, mingling with the smoke from small fires still burning along the edges of the camps. Despite the harsh cold, the soldiers' faces are flushed with a mixture of fear, resolve, and the cold sting of the morning air. The air buzzes quietly with tension, a tangible force that holds both armies on the knife's edge between peace and violence. On the Yorkist side, banners bearing the white rose flutter weakly in the chill breeze. Their troops, a mixture of seasoned knights and common foot soldiers, stand ready, their breath rising in small clouds. The air smells faintly of leather, metal, and smoke from campfires recently extinguished. The white rose emblem shines proudly. On shields, surcoats, and standards, a symbol of hope and ancient lineage. Among the ranks, men murmur prayers or exchange quiet words of encouragement, their eyes bright with a mixture of fear and determination. Horses stamped impatiently, their breath steaming in the cold air, while knights adjusted their armor in the pale morning light. The soldiers' faces reveal the harsh reality beneath the symbols. Many are young, inexperienced, and uncertain, but all are bound by loyalty to their cause and leader. Opposite them, the Lancastrians muster beneath the crimson banners of the Red Rose. Their faces are grim, some pale with cold, others flushed with anticipation. Among them are veterans loyal to King Henry VI and Queen Margaret, and men fighting for family, for honor, or simply for survival. The red banners ripple in the cold. Wind, a stark contrast against the white snow, soldiers clutch their weapons tightly, eyes scanning the distant enemy lines, their expressions hardening with resolve. The crackle of frozen ground beneath their feet mingles with the muffled voices of commanders issuing last-minute instructions. Some men pray silently, others grit their teeth and prepare mentally for the inevitable clash. The atmosphere is thick, with a heavy mixture of dread and fierce resolve, a testament to the human cost hidden behind every banner. Between them lies the field, a silent, snowy stage set for a clash that will echo through history. The space is wide and open, a cold expanse that will soon be marked by footsteps, blood, and the shouts of men. Snowflakes drift down slowly, landing on helmets and weapons, softening the edges of the terrible scene about to unfold. The cold air seems to hold the tension in place, a fragile barrier between peace and catastrophe. Both armies face each other across this frozen plain, separated by only a few hundred yards but divided by centuries of history. Family ties broken and burning ambitions. Here, the fate of kings, nobles, and countless soldiers will be decided beneath a cold, indifferent sky. That slow march to position in the hours before battle, soldiers and commanders alike prepare with meticulous care. Every movement is deliberate, every action loaded with significance. Men check their gear, steady their nerves, and ready themselves for what may be their final day. The long morning light reveals the smallest details, the glint of steel, the worn leather of boots, the frayed edges of banners buffeted by the wind. The campfires have died down, leaving only the faint smell of smoke hanging in the air. Horses whinny softly, sensing the mounting tension, while the clatter of armor and murmurs of men create a muted symphony of anticipation. Knights check the fittings of their armor, adjusting straps and tightening gauntlets. The cumbersome weight of plate and mail is both a protection and a burden. Squires move carefully among their lords, polishing helmets until they gleam faintly in the dim light and ensuring weapons are sharpened to a deadly edge. The rhythmic scrape of metal on metal is a constant reminder of the preparations for war. Foot soldiers, less encumbered but no less anxious, sharpen their axes, pikes, and swords. Some pace nervously, others sit quietly, lost in thought or prayer. The clinking of chainmail, the creak of leather straps, and the soft thud of boots on frozen ground fill the air with the sounds of imminent violence. Horses snort and paw the ground, sensing the tension. Their breath forms clouds in the cold air, and their muscles ripple beneath blankets or simple tack. Careful hands offer them hay and water from frozen troughs, though many animals tremble from the cold or nervous energy. Mounted knights stroke their mounts' necks or whisper soothing words, forging a quiet bond amid the looming chaos. Horses, like their riders, are aware that this day will be unlike any other. The relationship between man and beast here is vital. The horse can mean the difference between life and death, speed and vulnerability, survival and slaughter. Heralds and trumpeters ride between units, delivering final orders and reminders. Their calls pierce the cold morning air, echoing across the silent fields. The sharp notes of trumpets and the clear voices of heralds cut through the fog of tension, ensuring that commands reach every corner of the army. Drums begin to beat softly, building a rhythm that will soon swell into the thunderous cadence of battle. Commanders confer quietly, sharing last-minute strategies and assessing the enemy's disposition. The sense of order amidst the gathering storm is fragile. Every man knows that the coming hours will test discipline, courage, and loyalty in ways they have never experienced. The role of heraldry and symbols. In this world, banners and badges are far more than decoration. They are the language of loyalty, identity, and power. Every standard carries with it centuries of tradition, honor, and meaning. The sight of a familiar banner can inspire courage, while the loss or capture of one can devastate morale. These symbols speak silently but profoundly to men about who they serve and what they fight for. In battle, recognizing friend from foe at a glance is vital, a matter of survival. The white and red roses are not mere flowers, but living emblems of dynasties, faith, and bloodlines that have shaped England for generations. The white rose of York, delicate yet enduring, symbolizes ancient lineage and a claim born from the twilight of a great king's reign. Its petals are pure and sharp-edged, representing honor and purity amid turmoil. The rose is said to have originated as a symbol of peace and new beginnings. Yet here it is, the standard beneath which war is waged, embroidered in white silk and often set against deep blue or silver backgrounds. The York rose gleams like a beacon of hope to its followers. Its fragile beauty contrasts sharply with the harshness of war, reminding men of the ideals they believe they fight to uphold. The petals, described as finely serrated and perfectly symmetrical, reflect the medieval love for order and harmony. Even in chaos, the red rose of Lancaster burns, deep crimson, fierce, passionate, and proud, a sign of the rightful kings, power and the blood of ancestors spilled to defend the throne. The Lancastrian rose, larger and more robust than its York counterpart, is embroidered with thick threads of scarlet, symbolizing both the vitality and the violence of the Lancastrian cause. It is a badge worn with pride, carrying the weight of kings and queens who have fought and died to secure their dynasty's place. The color red evokes both passion and bloodshed, a constant reminder that loyalty to Lancaster is entwined with sacrifice. To many, the red rose is a rallying point, an unyielding symbol of strength and rightful authority amid the turmoil of the Wars of the Roses. These roses adorn shields, surcoats, and standards. To fight under one is to pledge loyalty. To face another is to confront betrayal and war. The visual contrast between white and red is stark and vivid, a battlefield of colors that matches the battlefield of men. Soldiers identify with their rose, drawing courage and identity from the symbol. Townsfolk and nobles alike recognize these emblems, and entire communities align themselves by them. The roses also appear in courtly poetry, songs, and tales told by firesides, deepening their resonance beyond the battlefield into the very culture of England. As these banners flutter weakly in the cold wind, they carry the hopes and fears of a nation divided. Men glance at their roses, some with fierce pride, others with quiet dread. The symbols bind them together even as they prepare to tear each other apart. For some, the rose is a shield against fear. For others, a reminder of family betrayed and homes lost. The weight of the emblem can be heavy, not just a badge of allegiance, but a chain binding men to a cause that will demand blood and sacrifice. In quiet moments, soldiers touch the embroidered petals or glance at the banners, seeking strength or reassurance. Yet beneath the loyalty, there is the ever-present question: what will the rose mean after this day? Victory, defeat, death. The psychology of waiting for battle is a strange time, neither peace nor violence. It is a liminal space filled with tension and uncertainty. The minutes stretch and fold upon themselves, the future unknown and unknowable. Soldiers feel the paradox of time slowing while their hearts race. Each breath seems heavier, each movement more deliberate. The mind grapples with fear and hope, courage and doubt. Waiting becomes a test of endurance as much as the battle to come. In the chill morning air, soldiers feel the weight of hours stretching endlessly. The body shivers with cold, but the mind burns with tension. Muscles tense involuntarily and nerves sharpen to a keen edge. Some men close their eyes, trying to find calm. Others bite their lips or clench fists to channel anxiety. The quiet conversations, the nervous laughter, and the solitary prayers all weave together into a tapestry of human emotion. Time itself seems stretched and elastic, moments both fleeting and eternal. Some men close their eyes, whispering prayers to saints for protection and courage. Their voices are barely audible, but their faith feels palpable. They clutch small crucifixes or rosaries, murmuring supplications in Latin or English. These prayers are acts of hope, a fragile shield against the storm to come. Others pace, sharpening weapons or recounting stories to distract themselves from the dread. Conversations meander from memories of home to the bravado of past battles, offering brief respite from the looming violence. The shared camaraderie is a fragile bond, but it cannot erase the knowledge that many will not survive this day. Leaders sit in small groups, speaking in low tones of tactics and the uncertainties ahead. They exchange information, make adjustments, and try to inspire confidence in their men. Trust is a fragile thing, and whispers of doubt ripple through the ranks. Some commanders mask their fears behind calm faces. Others speak openly of the risks involved. The weight of responsibility presses heavily upon them, not just for victory, but for the lives entrusted to their command. Every decision could tip the balance between triumph and tragedy. The tension tightens like a coil, ready to spring with the first clash of steel. It binds all present in a shared, silent understanding of what lies ahead. The quiet moments before battle carry their own profound drama, a suspenseful pause that defines the thin line between life and death. As the armies stand poised, waiting for the signal, the world seems to hold its breath. Waiting with them, the role of religion and faith is Palm Sunday, a day sacred to many. A day when Christian faithful commemorate Christ's entry into Jerusalem, a moment of hope before sacrifice. The significance of this holy day weighs heavily on the hearts of the men gathered. Many see the battle through the lens of faith, as a test of divine will, a struggle not just for earthly power, but for righteousness itself. The symbolism of Palm Sunday adds a layer of spiritual gravity to the day's violence. Priests move quietly among the troops, offering blessings, absolutions, and last rites. They carry small crosses and holy relics, their voices gentle but firm, as they urge men to find peace in faith amid the coming violence. The priests anoint the wounded, hear confessions, and offer prayers that echo softly across the field. Their presence reminds all that even in war, the soul remains paramount. For many soldiers, these moments of spiritual solace are a vital refuge. From fear and despair, many soldiers carry small tokens, a prayer book, a rosary, a saint's medal, clutched tightly against their hearts. These objects are more than superstition. They are tangible connections to hope, protection, and the divine. Worn beneath armor or tied to belts, these sacred items provide comfort and a sense of control in an otherwise chaotic world. Some men whisper prayers silently, invoking saints known for protection in battle. Others look upward, seeking signs from the heavens that their cause is just and that they will survive the coming storm. The belief that divine favor could tip the scales is powerful. Men look to the sky, searching for signs, hoping that God's will be revealed in the chaos. Clouds parting or birds in flight might be read as omens. A sudden gust of wind or the fall of snow can take on spiritual significance. This faith sustains many through moments of terror and exhaustion. It is a reminder that beyond the human struggle lies a higher power, a cosmic order that may yet shape the fate of kings and commoners alike. The weather's hidden hand, the snow and biting wind, are not mere background. They are active players in the coming conflict. The harshness of the weather will influence tactics, morale, and even the outcome itself. The cold bites through armor and clothing, sapping strength and numbing fingers. Snow muffles sounds, confusing signals and commands. Visibility is reduced, and the landscape's features are softened and blurred. Nature itself becomes a weapon, shaping the battle as surely as any sword or arrow. The cold numbs fingers, making weapons harder to wield. Soldiers feel the bite of frost in their hands, their grips loosening involuntarily. Stiff joints and aching muscles, slow movements, reducing the speed and effectiveness of attacks. The heavy armor, while protective, adds to the fatigue as men struggle against the cold. Horses, too, suffer, their breaths ragged and nostrils frosted. The simple act of holding a bowstring or raising a sword becomes a test of endurance in itself. Frozen ground can cause footing to slip or stumble. Patches of ice lurk beneath the snow, threatening to betray even the most disciplined foot soldiers. Knights charging on horseback risk losing control on slippery slopes, and foot soldiers face the constant danger of falls that could be fatal in the chaos of combat. Mud thawing underfoot turns the battlefield into a quagmire, trapping men and horses alike. These unpredictable conditions demand flexibility and courage. Snow obscures vision and muffles sound. Arrows lose some of their force as they fly through. Heavy snowflakes and signals from commanders can be lost in the wind. The battlefield becomes a shifting white expanse, where friend and foe can be mistaken for one another. The swirling snow creates an eerie, dreamlike atmosphere that adds to the confusion and terror. Soldiers strain to see through the flurries, their eyes stinging from cold and fatigue. Yet the Yorkists plan to use the wind, blowing steadily from the northwest, to their advantage. Archers position themselves so that their arrows will fly downwind, swift and deadly, obscured by the swirling snow. This strategic use of weather shows a keen understanding of their environment, turning a natural challenge into a tactical weapon. The wind carries their volleys, striking Lancastrian lines before the enemy can respond effectively. This subtle manipulation of nature's forces may well decide the battle's fate. The elements are as much a weapon as any sword or lance. The cold, wind, and snow shape the battle's tempo and tone. They affect morale and stamina, breaking men before steel can. As the armies prepare to clash beneath the heavy sky, they face not only each other but the relentless power of nature itself. The battlefield of Towton will be a fight not only of human wills, but of man against the harshest conditions of an English spring. Final deployment and orders. Commanders move among their ranks, adjusting lines and encouraging men. Their faces show a mix of determination and fatigue, bearing the weight of responsibility for thousands of lives. Every shift in formation, every repositioned banner is done with care and purpose. The ground crunches beneath armored boots as officers marshal their troops. The air is thick with anticipation, yet these moments demand calm and focus. The commanders' voices are low but firm, steadying the nerves of those who look to them for leadership. Edward IV, tall and resolute, rides slowly along the front, his white rose shining faintly against the dull colors of his armor. His presence is a beacon to the Yorkist troops, a symbol of hope, courage, and legitimacy. He surveys his forces with a steady eye, noting the readiness and discipline of his men. Though young, Edward carries the heavy mantle of kingship with quiet confidence. He knows the stakes. The throne of England hangs in the balance, and his fate, like that of his kingdom, will be forged in this bitter field. He speaks quietly with his captains, issuing last commands. Discipline will be crucial, and he demands order amid the chaos. His tone is calm but commanding, instilling confidence without harshness. The captains nod and pass his orders down the lines, reinforcing the chain of command. Every soldier must hold his place, every arrow must fly true, every charge must be timed precisely. Edward's leadership, measured and steady, is a vital anchor in the storm that approaches. Across the field, Queen Margaret watches from a nearby hill, her red cloak billowing, her face set with determination. She urges her generals to hold firm, to fight for their king and their dynasty. Her presence inspires fierce loyalty among Lancastrian troops, a reminder that their cause is not just political but deeply personal. Margaret's eyes scan the battlefield, assessing the enemy's strength and seeking any sign of weakness. She embodies the passion and resilience of the Lancastrian cause, a queen fighting not just for crown but for survival. The moment before contacts, the armies breathe as one, a collective, held breath that seems to still the very air. Time itself feels suspended as men steel themselves for the inevitable. The silence is profound, a stark contrast to the chaos that will soon erupt. Each man's heartbeat echoes in his ears, each breath a fragile thread in the fabric of the moment. The world seems to pause, waiting alongside them. The air is so still that every footstep, every clink of metal seems unnaturally loud. The crunch of boots on frozen ground, the faint scrape of armor, and the subtle murmur of whispered prayers create an eerie symphony of tension. Horses shift nervously, their breaths puffing like steam in the cold air. Even the river below seems quieter, as if holding its own breath. The stillness is both comforting and terrifying, a quiet before the storm. Men grip their weapons and tighten their shields. The leather straps creak softly. The steel edges glint faintly in the diffused light. Fingers curl tightly around sword hilts and spear shafts. Helmets are adjusted, visors lowered. The smell of sweat, cold metal, and leather fills the air. The soldier's eyes flash with resolve, fear, or grim acceptance. This is the last moment of peace before the tempest. Horses snort softly, shifting uneasily. The beasts share the soldiers. Tension Sensing the coming chaos, riders whisper reassurances or commands, trying to calm the powerful animals beneath them. The connection between horse and rider is delicate and vital, a partnership forged in trust and necessity. These mounts will carry their riders into the maelstrom of battle, where every movement might mean life or death. The drums and trumpets fall silent. The familiar signals that have marked preparation and warning now cease, replaced by a heavy stillness. The absence of sound is deafening, a vacuum waiting to be filled by the clash of armies. The silence marks the final threshold. Beyond it lies war. A heavy pause hangs, a breath held in time. The soldiers stand poised. The landscape holds its quiet vigil, and the world waits with bated breath. In this suspended moment, everything and nothing is certain. Then, with the faintest signal, the frozen calm will shatter, and the day's terrible story will begin. Part 5. The long struggle, hours of frozen fury. The battle at Towton dragged on relentlessly, stretching from the pale light of dawn deep into the graying afternoon. The vast field lay cloaked in snow, once a pristine white expanse, but now a landscape transformed into a grisly tableau of war's devastation. The freshly fallen snow, with its cold purity, was soon stained by dark, congealing pools of blood that soaked into the frozen earth, turning the battlefield into a treacherous mire of ice and gore. The bitter wind sweeping down from the Yorkshire moors whipped mercilessly through ranks of soldiers, carrying with it the metallic scent of blood and the acrid smoke of burning banners. The ground itself seemed unwilling to bear the weight of such carnage, thick with churned mud and frozen slush. It sapped the strength of men and horses alike, sucking boots and hooves into a grasping quagmire that threatened to swallow them. Whole soldiers stumbled blindly, their balance betrayed by the slick, uneven surface, while frozen limbs, numbed by the biting cold, slowed every movement. The din of battle was deafening, the clangor of metal on metal, the thudding impacts of axes and polearms against shields and armor, punctuated by the agonized screams and guttural cries of wounded men. It was a symphony of destruction, a desperate chorus underscoring the brutal test of endurance that defined Towton. The crushing burden of armor and endurance-heavy plate armor, designed to turn aside arrows and sword strikes alike, became an unforgiving burden in the frozen mire. Each warrior was encased in a shell of overlapping steel plates, forged and tempered to perfection but agonizingly heavy, sometimes tipping the scales at nearly 50 pounds, not including the weight of chainmail beneath or the padded garments. Worn for comfort, beneath the gleaming plates, gambesons, thick quilted jackets made of layers of linen and wool had absorbed snow and blood, becoming sodden and cumbersome. These layers, once protective and snug, now clung like dead, weight chilling skin and restricting movement. A sweat mixed with the icy rain and melting snow, it soaked through every layer, freezing quickly against the cold, leaving soldiers shivering beneath their iron armor. The very act of raising a sword, of parrying a blow, became a Herculean effort as muscles screamed in protest. Limbs that once moved with grace now jerked sluggishly, and the energy required to keep fighting grew with every heartbeat. Even the horses, their flanks slick with sweat and snow, staggered beneath their barding, their breath pluming white in the air, strained from the dual burdens of war and weather. The cold sapped life from man and beast alike, turning a contest of skill into a grinding battle of survival. The mental toll wars invisible wounds beyond the physical exhaustion. The psychological weight of the battle was crushing. Men who had marched bravely into battle now found their minds assaulted by relentless horror. The field was strewn with the fallen friends and comrades whose bloodied bodies littered the frozen ground, faces frozen in expressions of agony or shock. The cries of the wounded echoed like a relentless dirge, a haunting reminder of mortality that gnawed at the hearts of those still standing. Fear and adrenaline wove a tangled web through every soul, sometimes unleashing fierce, reckless fury, other times plunging men into numb resignation. The endless cycle of attack, retreat, and renewed assault left no time for respite or reflection. The mind was forced into a state of hyper-alertness, yet exhaustion brought moments of blankness, of dissociation, as soldiers sought refuge from the horror. These moments were dangerous. A slip in concentration could mean death. The camaraderie, forged in training and shared hardship, was tested brutally, as men grappled with the unbearable sight of slaughter and the grim reality that any one of them could fall next. Honor, loyalty, and duty wrestled with primal survival instincts in a desperate battle within each fighter's soul. Lost boots, numbed hands, and dulling blades in the chaos and mud. Many men lost their boots, the leather torn away by freezing. Mud and sudden slips, bare frost-bitten feet sank into the icy earth, numb and bleeding, struggling to maintain footing on the uneven, treacherous ground. Hands, too, suffered terribly. Fingers cramped and trembled violently from cold and exhaustion. The rough leather gloves soaked through and frozen stiff. Gripping a sword or polem became a battle in itself. The cold metal numbing skin, while sweat mixed with snow and blood froze into a cruel crust. The once sharp, deadly edges of swords were now nicked and dulled, their surfaces scarred from relentless clashing against armor and shields. Knights cursed in quiet frustration as their finely crafted weapons failed to bite cleanly through mail or plate, forcing them to rely on brute force or desperate thrusts. Shields, battered and splintered, no longer provided reliable defense. Many were cracked or pierced, leaving men exposed to deadly blows. The very tools meant to preserve life had become worn and compromised. Reflecting the brutal toll exacted by the endless struggle of this freezing battlefield, the complexity and craft of 15th century English plate armor. The armor worn by men at Towton represented the pinnacle of 15th century medieval metallurgy and design. English plate armor evolved to balance the competing demands of protection and mobility. The suit was composed of carefully articulated steel plates, shaped and polished to deflect blows while allowing enough freedom of movement to wield weapons effectively. The breastplate curved smoothly, designed to slide blows harmlessly aside. Rather than absorb the full force, arm and leg plates were jointed with rivets and leather straps, enabling bending and twisting without exposing vulnerable flesh. Gauntlets protected the hands while permitting finger dexterity, a marvel of engineering that allowed knights to grasp reins and weapons with precision. Helmets ranged from the close-fitting bassinet with its movable visor protecting face, and head to the larger, more open solid that provided better vision and airflow at the cost of some protection. Despite its sophistication, the armor was heavy and cumbersome, requiring warriors to train rigorously for years to endure its burden in battle. The suits offered a crucial advantage against the era's many weapons, but demanded extraordinary strength and endurance, especially in harsh conditions like those at Towton. Moreover, no armor could protect against the relentless cold seeping through gaps and chilling the blood of even the most heavily armored soldier. The social hierarchy on the battlefield, the armies that faced each other on Towton's frozen fields, were reflections of the medieval social order. At the summit stood the nobility, lords and knights clad in the finest armor, mounted on powerful steeds, and leading their retinues with practiced command. These men carried the weight of leadership and responsibility, their fortunes and titles intertwined with the outcome of battle. Below them were the men-at-arms, professional soldiers trained for combat and loyal to their lords. They wore quality armor and wielded a variety of weapons, serving as the backbone of the fighting force. Yet, the vast majority of the armies were levies, conscripted peasants and townsmen drawn from the surrounding countryside, often poorly armed with farm tools or crude weapons and wearing little to no armor. Their bravery was unquestioned, but their lack of training and equipment made them vulnerable in close combat. These levies fought with a fierce desperation, their lives and homes at stake, but suffered disproportionately high casualties. The battlefield was thus a microcosm of feudal society, where loyalty was both a personal bond and a social contract. Each man's place in this hierarchy shaped his experience of battle, his role in the chaos, and ultimately his fate. The diverse arsenal of medieval warfare, the weapons wielded on the Towton battlefield were as varied as the men who carried them. The classic arming sword, a versatile one-handed blade, was common among knights and men-at-arms, prized for its balance and effectiveness in both cutting and thrusting. Long swords, larger and often wielded with two hands, allowed greater reach and power, favored by seasoned warriors who could handle their weight. Polearms, such as halberds, glaives, and billhooks, combined the piercing capability of spears with the cutting or hooking power of axes, making them deadly tools for unseating mounted knights or striking down armored foes. Maces and warhammers delivered devastating blunt force, designed to crush or dent plate armor where swords might fail. Archers, primarily wielding the English longbow, provided lethal ranged support, capable of raining down deadly volleys that could disrupt enemy formations before melee began. Yet, in the grinding melee of Towton, close combat weapons took precedence. The clash of blades and strike of pelhams, the grim soundtrack of the day. Each weapon required skill and timing, and their effectiveness was as much about the fighter's strength and endurance as about design. Together, these weapons created a chaotic but deadly orchestra of medieval warfare. Heralds and banners, beacons of order in chaos amid the swirling chaos and tumult of battle, heralds and banners played a critical role in maintaining order. Colorful standards, emblazoned with the heraldic symbols of noble houses, fluttered defiantly against the grey sky. The white rose of York, crisp and pure, and the blood-red rose of Lancaster, vivid and fierce, were far more than mere decorations. They were rallying points, symbols of identity, and sources of morale. Heralds, dressed in tabards, bearing their lord's arms, moved courageously through the melee, shouting orders, relaying messages, and calling men to rally. Their voices cut through the cacophony of clashing steel and screams, a vital thread connecting scattered units and commanders. To lose a banner was a crushing blow, a sign of faltering spirit and broken lines, capable of triggering panic and retreat. Conversely, the sight of a familiar banner waving high could renew courage, bringing shattered fighters back into formation. Heralds risked life and limb as they darted across the battlefield, their presence a testament to the medieval reliance on symbols and communication in the chaos of war. The battle raged on, an unending test of endurance and will. Men fought against man and nature alike, their bodies pushed to the brink, their spirits tested in the cold crucible of war. Each breath was a struggle, each swing a defiance of death. The ground itself seemed soaked with sorrow, bearing witness to the relentless human cost of this brutal chapter in England's history. Yet, amidst the carnage, the flicker of hope for victory, for survival, for a future beyond war, persisted stubbornly, as fierce and fragile as the roses that bore the weight of a nation's destiny. Part 6. Reinforcements and collapse the turning tide. After hours of relentless, bitter fighting on the frozen fields of Towton, as the bitter cold gnawed mercilessly at the bones and spirits of every soldier, a quiet, tense moment hung over the blood-soaked land. The ground, once white and pristine beneath the winter's snow, was now churned and stained, soaked deeply with blood and mud, a brutal testament to the savagery that had unfolded under a pale, wintry sky. The cries of men and horses had slowly begun to fade into an eerie silence, punctuated only by the occasional groan of the wounded or the distant call of a raven circling overhead. Yet, on the far horizon, like a faint, steady heartbeat growing stronger with each passing moment, came the unmistakable sound of reinforcements. The clatter of armor, the rhythmic beat of marching feet, and the low murmur of battle-hardened voices echoed faintly across the frozen landscape. Fresh Yorkist troops were arriving. Their banners fluttered bravely in the cold wind, small flames of color against the bleakness of the snow-covered fields. Leading this vital relief was the Duke of Norfolk, a veteran commander whose presence alone inspired hope among the weary Yorkist ranks. His forces were composed of seasoned soldiers, men who had fought through countless campaigns and knew the brutal realities of war intimately. Their armor gleamed dully in the weak winter light, the metalwork etched with intricate patterns and marks of honor earned in battle. Archers tightened their bowstrings, and foot soldiers adjusted their grip on sword hilts, readying themselves to reinforce their comrades and push back against the faltering Lancastrian resistance. The arrival of Norfolk's troops was like a slow, steady surge of warmth in a frozen sea, a powerful force gathering momentum, strengthening the resolve of those who had nearly given up. Their appearance rekindled a spark of hope, a vital lifeline in a moment when despair threatened to overwhelm all Dot. As the fresh Yorkist forces steadily joined the battle-worn front lines, the Lancastrian soldiers began to feel the weight of the assault bearing down on them with crushing intensity. These men, many of whom had fought valiantly since dawn, were now worn thin by exhaustion, hunger, and the brutal cold that seeped deep into their bones. Their faces, pale and grimy, told tales of suffering and steadfastness, but the strain was unmistakable. The once proud and orderly Lancastrian formations, underpinned by loyalty to the Red Rose and their kings, started to fray and crack beneath the relentless Yorkist pressure. The red banners of Lancaster, symbols of passion, rightful kingship, and ancient lineage, were no longer waving with confidence, but trembling uncertainly in the bitter wind. The vivid crimson seemed dulled by the thick snow and stained with the grime and blood of battle, as if the very colors were drained by the prolonged suffering. Commanders shouted desperate orders, but confusion reigned. Signals were missed, messengers lost, and the chain of command began to crumble. The disciplined lines turned into disorganized clusters of frightened men, some trying to hold ground, others seeking any escape from the growing storm. The loyal hearts that had once beaten boldly for Lancaster now quivered in fear. Panic, subtle at first, then spreading rapidly, took hold. It moved through the Lancastrian ranks like a creeping fog, enveloping soldiers in doubt and despair. This collapse was not sudden, a mere instant of failure, but a slow, creeping ruin that unfolded step by painful step, like the gradual collapse of a great stone wall, each brick falling loose one by one until the whole structure was undone. Soldiers stumbled over icy patches, their feet sliding on treacherous frozen mud, their armor heavy and unforgiving. The weight of their iron breastplates and chainmail, designed to protect in the heat of battle, now became a cruel burden, making every movement slow and awkward. Hands numb with cold fumbled at weapons, arrows misfired, and shields slipped from grasp. Men fell to their knees, then to the frozen ground, some never rising again. The relentless Yorkist advance pressed down like a merciless winter storm, breaking through brittle branches, snapping them with ease. The Lancastrian soldiers, trapped between the fury of their pursuers and the icy earth beneath their feet, faced a grim choice: stand and be cut down, or run and risk the deadly hazards of the terrain. Many chose flight, driven by a primal will to survive that surged through the panic-stricken masses like wildfire. The retreat itself was a scene of tragic chaos, a desperate scramble drenched in horror and cold. Imagine tired, broken men slipping and sliding helplessly across the icy, blood-slicked fields. The snow, once soft and white, was now a treacherous crust of ice, beneath which lurked hidden puddles of freezing water and thick mud. Warriors lost their footing in an instant, toppling over one another like dominoes. The heavy armor that protected them in battle now dragged them down mercilessly, like anchors sinking in a dark sea. Those who fell faced a peril worse than death. The frozen rivercock awaited nearby, swollen with winter thaw and stained deep red with the blood of countless fallen soldiers. The river, usually a quiet, slow-moving body of water, had turned into a treacherous trap. Its icy surface cracked and broke under the weight of panicked men and horses alike. Those who slipped into its cold depths struggled violently, gasping for breath in the freezing water that threatened to steal their life with every heartbeat. The cold was merciless, a cruel thief that stole strength and consciousness with terrifying speed. Heavy metal armor and mail, soaked through and waterlogged, became death sentences, pulling men beneath the surface in a watery grave. Struggles were brief and desperate, cries muffled as soldiers were dragged under the dark waves by their own protective gear. The horses, vital companions of knights and men-at-arms, added a chaotic and heart-rending layer to the retreat. Many were terrified by the unfolding disaster, their instincts screaming for flight. Their loud, panicked screams pierced the cold air, echoing eerily over the battlefield like cries from a realm beyond. In their frantic efforts to flee, many horses crashed wildly into trees lining the riverbank. The sound of splintering wood filled the air as powerful hooves shattered brittle branches, sending sharp fragments flying in all directions. Some horses were thrown violently to the ground, throwing their riders into the freezing mud or directly into the water. The cries of animals mixed with the agonized shouts of their riders, weaving a dreadful, discordant symphony of suffering. Knights, often weighed down by heavy armor, found themselves trapped in this nightmare. Some were dragged along as their mounts bolted, others struggled to regain control amidst the chaos, while many were simply overwhelmed and cast helplessly aside. This chaotic retreat was not merely a withdrawal, but a desperate flight from inevitable defeat, a moment when the fragile line between life and death was all too thin. The snow continued to fall gently, softening the brutal landscape with a quiet, almost peaceful shroud, as if the earth itself was trying to cover the scars of war beneath a blanket of white. The cold wind whispered through the trees, carrying away the dying screams and fading footsteps into the vast silence that followed. This silence was heavy and profound. It was the silence of a land changed forever by violence, a silence that held the weight of loss and the faint hope of new beginnings. The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. Part 7. Aftermath: The Silent Fields of Towton. The battle was finally over, but the land itself did not yet heal. The fields around Towton, which had just hours before echoed with the clash of steel, the cries of charging men, the thunder of hooves, and the shouts of commanders, were now cloaked in an eerie and unnatural silence. The cold winter wind swept steadily across the scarred earth, carrying away the last echoes of the savage contest, leaving behind only a haunting stillness. Snowflakes continued to fall gently, soft and unrelenting, blanketing the ground with a cold, ghostly white that attempted to mask the horrors beneath, but could never fully conceal the devastation. The once vibrant grass was now trampled into mud and frozen with the blood of thousands. Towton had become a vast graveyard, strewn with the bodies of men who had fought with desperation and valor only to meet death on that frozen battlefield. The dead lay as silent witnesses to a day so violent and brutal that it shattered the very foundations of England's future. Their faces, many frozen in expressions of pain, fear, or fierce determination, were half buried in snow or mud, many with armor cracked or broken, weapons still clenched in their stiffened hands. The wind carried a chill that seemed to seep into the bones of those who stood surveying the field, a chill that echoed the coldness of death itself. Towton was not just a battlefield, it was a monument to loss, to sacrifice, and to the terrible cost of dynastic ambition. In the days following the battle, local villagers, farmers, blacksmiths, millers, and simple country folk who had avoided the fighting were conscripted or volunteered to perform the grim duty of burying the dead. These ordinary men and women, unaccustomed to the horrors of war, were forced to become the caretakers of the fallen. Their hands, roughened by years of toil but trembling now from cold and sorrow, dug shallow graves in the frozen ground, struggling against stiff earth that cracked like old bones beneath their shovels. The bitter winter air stung their lungs. As they worked silently, often with tears frozen to their cheeks, they gathered the bodies in small groups or laid them side by side in hastily dug trenches, wrapping some in tattered clothing or blankets, while others were left naked or covered only by snow. The sheer number of dead was overwhelming. It was impossible to give every fallen soldier a proper burial or a named grave. Many bodies were piled in mass graves, stacked one on top of another, a silent testament to the unrelenting horror of the day. The stench of blood, decay, and cold earth permeated the air, a heavy, nauseating miasma that clung to the noses and clothes of those who worked. There were no prayers for most. The urgency to cover the bodies before the harsh winter weather worsened was paramount. The villagers' faces were etched with grief and fatigue, haunted by memories of the cries and the faces of the dying they had glimpsed amid the chaos, and burdened by the weight of their grim task. The land itself seemed to mourn, as if refusing to let go of the terrible memory of the battle. The landscape around Towton, once a peaceful stretch of rolling fields and quiet woods, now bore the scars of unimaginable violence. The snow continued to fall in silent flurries, coating the fields in a soft, white shroud that contrasted starkly with the crimson stains seeping into the frozen ground. The trees, stripped bare by winter's cold breath, stood like silent sentinels, their skeletal branches creaking softly in the wind as if whispering secrets of the past. Above, the sky was a dull grey, heavy with clouds that seemed to press down upon the earth, mirroring the weight of sorrow hanging over the land. Ravens, those black-winged scavengers, symbols of death and foreboding, had descended upon the battlefield. Their sharp, piercing cries cut through the cold stillness as they circled in the air, then landed amidst the fallen, pecking and scavenging what remained of the broken and fallen soldiers. Their glossy feathers gleamed in the pale winter light, a stark contrast to the lifeless faces beneath. The bird's presence was a grim reminder of nature's indifferent cycle, where even in the aftermath of human carnage, life and death intertwine endlessly. The wind carried the faint sound of their cries, mingling with the rustle of dried leaves and the soft drip of melting ice, composing a mournful dirge for a land drenched in blood and sorrow. As the weeks passed, the full extent of Towton's carnage became an unavoidable reality for the surrounding communities and for England as a whole. The nearby villages, small and often isolated, were overwhelmed not only by the physical toll, but also by the psychological weight of the battle's aftermath. Widows grieved their lost husbands, children mourned absent fathers and families, struggled to piece together the shattered remnants of their lives. The survivors, those who had fled or been spared, returned bearing wounds both visible and hidden, their eyes haunted by memories too painful to share. Fields once fertile and full of promise lay fallow and untended, their crops left to wither in the cold. The normal rhythms of rural life slowed to a crawl as the community struggled to recover from the devastation, both physical and emotional. The distant sound of church bells tolled solemnly, calling the faithful to pray not only for peace, but for forgiveness, for healing, and for an end to the relentless cycle of violence that had brought such ruin. Towton was a wound upon the nation's soul, a reminder of the brutal cost of dynastic ambition and the fragility of peace. And yet, Amid the deep sorrow and ruin, history marched inexorably forward. The young and determined Edward IV, the fiery and charismatic leader of the Yorkist cause, had emerged victorious on the frozen fields of Towton. His claim to the throne was no longer a mere aspiration or a contested title. It was the hard reality, carved out by the steel of his sword and the blood of thousands. His victory shattered the hopes of the Lancastrians and their supporters, many of whom now fled in despair, their banners torn and their cause seemingly lost. King Henry VI, fragile in body and mind, fled from the capital, a shadow of the once powerful monarch. His queen, Margaret of Anjou, a woman of fierce will and unwavering loyalty, retreated into the shadows of exile and secrecy. Though defeated, she refused to surrender, rallying Lancastrian loyalists across the countryside and beyond England's borders. The struggle between the red and white roses was far from over, simmering beneath the surface as a bitter, unresolved feud that would flare again in years to come. The battle's conclusion marked not an end, but a beginning grim, bloody new chapter in England's long and turbulent history. Edward IV's triumph signaled the rise of Yorkist power, but the divisions that had torn the country apart would not heal quickly. The White Rose, now victorious, stood tall, but the Red Rose, bloodied but unbowed, remained defiant and alive. In the hearts of many, Towton was a battlefield frozen in time, its silent fields forever marked by the terrible sacrifice and the relentless struggle for power. It was a place where the past whispered its stories through the rustling wind, where the scars of war remained etched upon the land and in the hearts of the people. And so the story of England's Wars of the Roses continued, a saga of loyalty and betrayal, honor and ambition, love and laws woven into the very fabric of the nation's soul. Part 8. Legacy and Memory. The quiet fields of Towton today. The site of the Battle of Towton presents a very different picture from the chaos and carnage of that fateful day in 1461. What once was a landscape of thunderous hooves, clashing swords and cries of agony has transformed over centuries into a calm, green expanse of gently rolling fields and quiet, whispering woods. The air is soft and still, carrying only the gentle rustling of leaves and the occasional distant call of birds. To the casual visitor, the land seems unassuming, peaceful, serene, almost untouched by the violent history beneath their feet. Wildflowers bloom in the springtime, grass sways in the warm summer breeze, and the sun sets in quiet golden hues, casting long shadows over the tranquil fields. Yet, beneath this pastoral calm lies a deep, enduring memory, a silent witness to the terrible events that once unfolded here. The land holds stories, buried beneath layers of earth, of men who fought and died in a struggle for power that changed the course of English history. Walking across Towton today, one might imagine the footsteps of soldiers long gone, their courage and fear, their hopes and despair. It is a place where history and nature entwine, where the present rests upon the weight of the past, and where the quiet beauty of the land masks the echoes of ancient violence beneath the surface. Modern archaeology has revealed unsettling glimpses of the brutal reality that once stained these fields with blood. Over the past decades, careful and painstaking archaeological digs have uncovered human remains, skulls and bones that tell silent, harrowing tales of the battle's ferocity. The skeletons bear deep wounds, sword cuts that cleaved bone and flesh, arrowheads embedded in ribs, signs of brutal hand-to-hand combat. Some skulls show evidence of multiple strikes, suggesting the merciless nature of medieval warfare, where retreat was often impossible and mercy rarely given. Archaeologists working at Towton have had to tread carefully, respecting the sanctity of these ancient graves, even as they piece together the story of the battle. Each discovery adds a new fragment to the puzzle, helping historians understand not just how the battle was fought, but the human cost, the shattered lives and broken bodies beneath the soil. These findings are somber reminders of the violence and suffering that defined the Wars of the Roses, grounding the grand historical narratives in the stark reality of human experience. The bones spake across centuries, telling of loyalty, sacrifice, and the harshness of war, inviting us to remember and reflect. Standing quietly on the battlefield is the Towton Crosser, simple but poignant memorial, erected to honor those who fell in that brutal conflict. The cross rises modestly from the ground, carved from local stone, weathered by wind and rain over the centuries. It stands not as a monument to victory or defeat, but as a symbol of remembrance, a place where visitors can pause and pay respect to the thousands of lives lost on these fields. Inscribed with words of sorrow and hope, the Towton Cross reminds us of the shared humanity behind the banners and roses of fathers, sons, brothers, and friends caught in the tides of history. Around the cross, wildflowers and grass grow freely, nature reclaiming the scars of war with gentle persistence. Visitors often leave small tokens of flower, a pebble, a quiet prayer connecting past and present, honoring those who gave everything in a conflict, far removed from the everyday lives of people today. The memorial does not seek to glorify battle, but to preserve memory, reminding us that behind the pageantry of history are real people, real suffering, and real loss. It is a solemn invitation to reflect on the cost of war and on the value of peace. Why do we remember battles like Towton? What draws us, centuries later, to these quiet fields where so many died? The answer lies in the deep human need to understand our past, to honor those who shaped it, and to learn from the tragedies that came before. Remembering such battles is not about celebrating violence or division. It is about acknowledging the complex tapestry of history, where ambition, loyalty, courage, and tragedy intertwine. These stories remind us of the fragility of peace, the consequences of power struggles, and the resilience of those who endured. Memory is also a way of connecting across time, linking the people of today with those who came before. It offers a chance to bear witness, to ensure that the sacrifices of countless individuals are not forgotten but woven into the collective consciousness. In this act of remembrance, we find both sorrow and hope. Sorrow for the suffering endured, and hope that through understanding and reflection, humanity can strive for a better, more peaceful future. The fields of Towton whispered this message softly through the rustling grass and the quiet wind, inviting us to listen. As time flows onward, sweeping away the years and the centuries, peace always finds its way back to even the most scarred lands. The wars, the battles, the bitter conflicts that once tore apart kingdoms and families slowly fade into history, their immediate wounds healing with the passage of time. Yet, the memories remain a quiet pulse beneath the surface of the earth, and the hearts of those who remember. Towton today is a testament to this passage of time, a place where the horrors of the past have been gently softened by the relentless rhythms of nature and the enduring human spirit. The peaceful green fields, the singing birds, the gentle rustling of leaves all remind us that life continues even after the darkest days. The cycle of seasons brings renewal, growth, and hope. And in this ongoing cycle, we find reassurance that no matter how deep the scars of history, peace can and does return. Towton's legacy, etched in stone and memory, is both a warning and a comforting reminder that even amidst conflict, humanity endures, and the quiet of the fields after the storm holds a promise for tomorrow. Outro: the resting battlefield. Now, the snow has finally melted away. The cold, harsh blanket that once covered the battlefield, the snow stained with ice. Blood and the sweat of warriors has softened into the earth beneath your feet. Where once the clash of steel and the roar of men filled the air, now wildflowers bloom in quiet profusion, their delicate petals opening slowly to the warmth of the sun. Soft grasses sway gently in the breeze, whispering secrets carried from centuries past, weaving the story of this land into the calm breath of nature. The battlefield, once a place of chaos and sorrow, now lies peaceful and still, resting beneath a canopy of green and color, cradled by the gentle arms of time. You too can rest now. Let your muscles loosen and your mind slow, allowing the steady rhythm of your breath to carry you away from the noise of the day. Imagine yourself lying among those soft grasses, the warmth of the earth beneath you steady and comforting. The wind carries the faint scent of wildflowers and fresh leaves, mingling with the crispness of the fading snow. With each breath, feel the calmness of this place settle deep within you, as if the land itself is wrapping you in a quiet embrace. Here, there are no battles to fight, no fears to face, only the gentle hush of history and the peaceful promise of rest. Let the quiet of history guide you gently into sleep. The stories of old, whispered through rustling leaves and the soft hum of distant birds, drift around you like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. These tales are not of sorrow or pain, but of endurance and hope, reminders that no matter the storms we weather, peace will come again. As your eyelids grow heavy and your thoughts begin to slow, imagine the sun setting low over the fields, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The world softens around you, and you are carried further into the calm, deepening quiet that only night can bring. Tomorrow is another day, far from swords and snow, far from the cold clash of armies and the frozen rivers that once swallowed. So many tomorrow is a day of fresh beginnings, of gentle light and warmth, a chance to move forward into peace. Rest now, safe beneath the wildflowers and grasses, cradled by the land's quiet memory. Sleep well, knowing that the battlefields of the past lie silent and still, and that you, too, can find your own place of peace beneath the sky.